Chapter 4. The kitchen was the only room in the house that didn't feel like a coffin yet, but the mud was working on it. Elias slid across the linoleum in his socks, nearly wiping out as he rounded the corner from the hallway. His flashlight beam wildly slashed across the cabinets, the stove, and finally, the wall by the pantry. There it was, an ancient beige wall phone, the kind with a curly cord that looked like a stretched-out slinky. The sound from outside was changing. The wet slapping of the mud rain against the siding had slowed down, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. It was the sound of earth being piled on top of a wooden box. The windows above the sink were already brown smears, completely blocked out. The soil wasn't just falling, it was sticking. It was sealing him in. Elias snatched the receiver off the hook. He didn't expect a dial tone. He expected silence, or maybe the sound of demons laughing, or whatever the hell happened in movies when the guy was about to die. A dial tone, clear, steady, and beautiful. Yes, Elias hissed, his voice shaking. Okay, think. He jammed his finger onto the keypad. 911. He held his breath. Click, click, click. All circuits are busy. Please try your call again. Elias slammed the receiver against the wall. Useless. He hit the disconnect button, his thumb trembling so hard he could barely keep it steady. He needed a local number. He needed someone who wasn't a recorded operator in a call center 3 states away. He needed the crazy lady with the shotgun. He didn't know her number. He didn't have a phone book. Then he looked at the wall next to the phone. Plastered there, yellowed with age and grease, was a piece of notebook paper taped up with scotch tape. His grandfather's handwriting. Feed store 555-0129. Vet 555-0188. Gable 555-0140. Elias punched the numbers in, messing up the first time and having to start over. He squeezed the handset so tight the plastic creaked. Ring. Pick up, Elias pleaded. He looked over his shoulder at the dark hallway leading to the stairs. He imagined the scarecrow flowing under the door crack like smoke or smashing through the ceiling. Pick up, you old bat. Ring. Click. If you're calling to sell me siding, I'm loading the 12 gauge, voice crackled. It was dry, sharp, and utterly unimpressed. Mrs. Gable, Elias shouted, nearly sobbing with relief. It's me, it's Elias, from next door. Silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh that sounded like tires crunching on gravel. I told you, boy, I told you not to break the line. I didn't break anything, it broke in. The lights exploded. It's raining mud, Mrs. Gable. The mud is covering the windows. That ain't rain, Mrs. Gable said calmly. That's the land taking back what it's owed. The house is part of the soil, Elias, just like the corn, just like you. Stop talking in riddles, Elias screamed. He grabbed a heavy cast iron skillet from the stove with his free hand, holding it like a club. I need help. Call the police. Come over here with your truck. I'm trapped. I ain't coming out there, she said flatly. I'm in my storm cellar with the bolt drawn, and the police can't arrest a harvest debt. What debt? I don't owe anybody anything. I just got here. Your granddaddy didn't die of a heart attack. Gable's voice dropped, becoming serious, stripping away the mockery. He was tired. 50 years he watched that field. 50 years he kept his eyes open every night to keep that thing on its post. But he got old. His eyes got bad. Elias froze. The kitchen felt freezing cold, but sweat was pouring down his back. What do you mean? He tried to leave, Gable said. Packed his bag a week ago. Got as far as the bridge, but the pact holds. You can't leave until a replacement is sworn in. He knew that, so he came back to the house and he made sure he wouldn't have to watch anymore. Elias felt bile rise in his throat. So he killed himself? He quit, she corrected, And when the watcher quits, the field comes to collect. But he wrote you into the deed, boy. He signed the bloodline over. He bought himself an exit by selling you as the entrance. Elias leaned his forehead against the wall, fighting the urge to vomit. So the scarecrow wants to kill me? To punish me? No, she whispered. The words sent a chill straight through the phone line. It don't want to kill you. It's got no hate in it. It's just a vessel, an empty suit. It's not empty, Elias argued, his voice high and frantic. I shot it. It healed itself. It walked. It walks because it's looking for a driver, Elias. Why do you think it has no eyes? Elias stared at the black window above the sink. The image of that blank burlap face burned in his mind, the dark stains where the eyes should be. Why? He breathed.
Because it needs yours, Gable said. It needs a watcher inside it. That's the deal your great-great-granddaddy made to make the crops grow in this dust bowl. The land gives life, but it needs a soul to stand guard. The straw man is just the uniform. It's waiting for you to put it on. The phone line crackled with static. You have to stop it, Elias begged, his voice small. Tell me how to stop it. I'll burn the field. I'll salt the earth, anything. Too late for salt, Gable said. You let it cross the 30 rows. You blinked, son. You let it get close. It's at row 10, Elias shouted. It was at row 10 a minute ago. Row 10? Gable paused. How long have you been on the phone with me, Elias? Elias checked his watch. 2 minutes, maybe 3. And you ain't looking at it right now, are you? The blood in Elias's veins turned to ice water. He wasn't looking at the field. He was in the kitchen, facing the wall, talking on the phone. He had turned his back on the enemy. Run, Gable said. It wasn't a suggestion. Click. The line went dead. Elias dropped the phone. It dangled by its cord, swaying back and forth like a pendulum. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the settling of the mud on the roof. The air smelled thick and copper-tasting. Then he heard it. It wasn't a crash. It wasn't a roar. It was a footstep. Thump. It came from the front porch. The wooden boards groaned under a weight that sounded far heavier than a man. It sounded like wet sand being dropped from a height. Elias spun around, raising the cast-iron skillet. He backed up until his hips hit the kitchen counter. 10 rows, Elias whispered to himself. It was 10 rows away. Thump. Another step, closer to the front door. Elias did the math in his head, the numbers screaming at him. If it moved 3 rows a night when he slept, and 10 rows in a single flash of lightning, how fast did it move when he spent 3 minutes staring at a wall? Fast enough. Thump. It was right outside the door. Elias's eyes darted to the front hallway. The front door was solid oak. He had locked the deadbolt. He had wedged a chair under the handle. It was strong. It was secure. But he remembered the journal entry. It moves when you refuse to see it. Walls didn't stop it. Locks didn't stop it. Only eyes stopped it. And Elias couldn't see through the door. A sound started on the other side of the wood. It wasn't scratching this time. It was a soft, wet rustling, like someone rubbing 2 pieces of burlap together. Go away, Elias shouted. I'm not the one. I didn't sign anything. The rustling stopped. Then the doorknob began to turn. It groaned, metal grinding against metal. The lock was engaged, but the knob kept turning, bypassing the mechanism with a sickening crunch of shearing pins. The chair Elias had wedged under the handle creaked. One of its legs lifted off the floor an inch, then 2 inches. The wood of the chair bowed under the immense pressure pushing from the outside. Elias looked around the kitchen frantically. There was no back exit. The sliding door was in the living room, and that was too close to the front. The windows were sealed with mud. The basement. The door to the cellar was right there, next to the pantry. It was a trap, a dead end,
but it was the only door between him and the thing on the porch. Elias scrambled for the cellar door, yanking it open. The smell of mildew and cold earth rushed up to meet him. Crack! In the hallway, the chair wedged against the front door snapped into splinters. The door swung open. The wind didn't howl in. The rain didn't blow in. The storm had stopped. Standing in the doorway, framed by the darkness of the night, was the figure. It was immense. Up close, it was so much worse than through a rifle scope. The tuxedo was a ruin of green mold and black rot, dripping sludge onto the floorboards. The burlap head scraped the top of the doorframe, and it was vibrating. The whole thing was shaking, trembling with a terrible pent-up energy. The blank face turned towards the kitchen, towards Elias. There were no eyes, but Elias felt the gaze. It felt like standing in front of an open furnace. My turn. The voice didn't come from the scarecrow's mouth. It came from everywhere. It came from the walls, from the floor, from the mug pressing against the windows. It was the house speaking through the straw. Elias didn't wait. He threw himself into the cellar darkness, slamming the door behind him. He fumbled for the lock on the inside of the cellar door, a flimsy hook and eye latch that wouldn't stop a determined toddler, let alone a monster. He hooked it anyway. He backed down the stairs, his flashlight beam shaking so hard it looked like a strobe light. "Stupid," he sobbed. "Stupid, stupid."
He reached the bottom of the stairs. The cellar was unfinished, just dirt floor and stone walls. Old shelving units stood in the shadows, filled with jars of preserved vegetables that had gone black decades ago. Above him, on the other side of the thin wooden door, there was silence. Elias held his breath, hand over his mouth. Maybe it couldn't come down. Maybe the rules were different for the cellar. Then dust sifted down from the ceiling rafters. Creak. A footstep on the kitchen floor, right above his head. Creak. Another one. It was heavy, methodical. It wasn't rushing. It knew exactly where he was. Elias scanned the cellar. There had to be a way out. An old coal chute? A storm drain? His light fell on the far wall. There was a small, square wooden door set into the stone foundation, about waist high. A root cellar? Or maybe an access panel to a crawl space? He ran to it, dropping the skillet. He clawed at the edges of the small wooden panel. It was stuck, painted shutter swollen with damp. "Come on," he grunted, digging his fingernails into the wood. Above him, the kitchen floorboards groaned. The footsteps stopped right in front of the cellar door. Elias heard the flimsy hook and eye latch rattle. Tink. The hook popped off. It hit the floorboards upstairs. The cellar door creaked open slowly. Elias didn't look up. He kicked the small wooden panel in the wall, once, twice. The wood splintered. He kicked again, his boots smashing through the rotten timber. A draft of cold, wet air hit his face. It led outside. It was tight, barely wide enough for his shoulders, but it was a way out. He dove headfirst into the hole, wiggling his body through the jagged opening. The rough stone scraped his sides, tearing his shirt. He kicked his legs, pushing himself forward into the mud outside. He squeezed through, gasping as he tumbled out into the wet grass of the side yard. He was out. He was free. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with fog. Elias scrambled to his feet, slipping in the mud. He needed to get to the creek. If he could swim across, he could run to the main road. He could run until his lungs burst. He sprinted toward the front of the house, rounding the corner. He stopped dead. The fog swirled around the driveway. The fallen oak tree was still blocking his truck. The floodwaters from the creek were still churning, black and angry. But that wasn't what made him stop. Standing in the middle of the driveway, blocking the path to the creek, was a figure. It wore a rotting tuxedo. It had a burlap sack for a head. Elias spun around.
He looked back at the house. The front door was open. The cellar door was open. The house was empty. He looked back at the figure in the driveway. It hadn't chased him through the house. It hadn't walked down the stairs. It was just there. Distance isn't real, Elias realized, the hysterical giggle bubbling up in his throat. It's not about walking. It's about being where I am. The scarecrow took a step forward. Elias stepped back, his boots hitting the first wooden slat of the bridge that used to lead to the road, the bridge that was smashed by the tree. He was pinned between the rising water and the straw man. The scarecrow raised its arms. The sleeves were empty, flapping in the breeze. But then, from inside the dark hollow of the left sleeve, something slid out. It wasn't a hand made of straw. It was a long, curved sickle, the blade rusted and stained brown. "Your shift," the voice rasped, vibrating through the wet air. Elias looked left, the flooded creek, death by drowning. He looked right, the dense woods, darkness. He looked forward, the blade. He looked down at his hand. He was still holding the cordless drill he'd had in his pocket since the bedroom. It was heavy, a DeWalt 20-volt with a fresh battery. A hysterical contractor's thought popped into his head. Power tools beat hand tools. It was a stupid thought, a suicidal thought, but Elias was out of smart ideas. He didn't run away. He screamed, a raw animal sound of pure terror and rage, and charged straight at the thing in the tuxedo. The scarecrow seemed surprised. It didn't swing the sickle immediately. It paused, just for a fraction of a second. Elias slid on the mud, dropping to his knees like a baseball player sliding into home, ducking under the sweeping arc of the rusted blade. He slammed into the scarecrow's legs. They felt hard as ironwood. Elias jammed the drill upward, driving the spinning Phillips head bit directly into the center of the burlap torso, right where a heart would be. He squeezed the trigger. Whirr. The drill bit caught the burlap. It caught the straw. It twisted. The scarecrow shrieked. It wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of 1,000 dry stalks of corn snapping at once. The burlap chest twisted, winding up around the drill bit, pulling tight. Elias didn't let go. He pushed harder. "Harvest this," he yelled. Suddenly, the scarecrow collapsed. The tuxedo jacket deflated. The pole inside, if there was one, vanished. The burlap head flopped forward, lifeless. Elias fell on top of the pile of wet, rotting rags. He was panting, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He did it. He killed it. It was just a thing, a puppet. He scrambled backward, away from the pile of clothes. He sat in the mud, staring at it. "I won," he wheezed. "I won." The fog swirled. The silence returned. Then, from the pile of rags, a shadow began to leak out. It wasn't a shadow cast by light. It was a liquid darkness oozing from the neck hole of the burlap sack. It pooled on the driveway, blacker than the night, blacker than the mud. It began to rise. It didn't form a shape. It formed a void, a human-shaped hole in the world, and it turned to face Elias. Elias looked at the void, and he realized the mistake he had made. He had destroyed the vessel. He had broken the cage. Now, the thing that lived inside the scarecrow was free, and it was looking for a new suit. Elias tried to scramble up, but his legs wouldn't work. The mud around his ankles felt suddenly thick, heavy. It hardened instantly. He looked down. His jeans were turning gray. The fabric was coarsening, weaving itself into a thick, rough material. Burlap. "No," Elias whispered. He tried to pull his hand up. His fingers were stiff. His skin was turning yellow and dry. He could feel his blood slowing down, turning to sap. He could feel his bones drying out, becoming light and brittle like old stalks. The shadow loomed over him, reaching out with hands made of smoke. "New coat," the voice whispered right in his ear. Elias opened his mouth to scream, but all that came out was the dry rustle of wind through dead corn.